the epitome of freedom. Freedom from restriction, boundaries, and arbitrary control. Freedom to roam the vast oceans at will, unhindered and unconfined. Without tether or bondage, they are free to wander, play, and explore. In a world older than ours, they move finished and complete, gifted with senses we have lost or never attained, living by voices we shall never comprehend. Born free. Nature has intended them to remain free and exempt from domination. Free for now. But are these gentle giants safe from the hands of human tyranny? Orcinus orca, or more commonly known as the killer whale. They take our breath away with every majestic leap. Once regarded as simple predators, we now understand orcas to be complex, intelligent, and gentle creatures. In fact, they are not really whales at all, but the largest member of the dolphin family. They have a brain 5 times the size of our own, giving them an exceptional capacity for memory and communication. They are social beings, roaming the vast oceans in matriarchal societies of closely knit family pods. With precision sonar, they are great navigators, ruling the seas with power and grace. In Miami, Florida, there lives a very special orca, one with a remarkable will to survive. She is a 37-year-old performer named Lolita. Lolita was taken from the wild over 3 decades ago to be trained and put on display. Today, she is the remaining survivor of the Puget Sound roundups. On August 8, 1970, Lolita and her family were swimming peacefully off the coast of Washington state, en route to a ritual gathering of the orca nations. Every year, the orca pods of the Northwest make the long pilgrimage to Possession Sound for the celebration. But for Lolita, the day took a tragic turn. She and 10 other family members would never make it to this or any other family reunion again. As a pod of more than 100 whales moved through the inlet, legendary orca trainer Ted Griffin and his capture team quickly gave chase. Speedboats roared out to greet the pod. An assault of explosives quickly ensued. Deafening bombs exploded around the family as boats and small aircraft attempted to herd the disoriented whales into Puget Sound's Penn Cove Inlet. Attempting to protect their young, mature whales instinctively split into 2 groups and sent decoys to distract hunters from the infants and adolescents. The decoys tried to lead the hunters on a wild chase away from the pod, but pursuers were relentless, hurling nets into the water and trapping the panicked family in Penn Cove Inlet. The air was thick with the sound of screaming whales as they thrashed in the tangled nets. Piercing shrills were heard for miles, according to local residents Lila Snover and Barbara Stevens.
Sounds they made were what we really noticed, but what you really felt were the cries of both the small ones and the adult ones. And I remember one day I stopped over there right close to them with my children that were very small at the time, and they kept saying, "Why are they crying? They're crying." It just broke your heart, everybody that saw them. And you kept wanting them to let them go. What harassing them?
There was a group of people that even contemplated going out in small boats, like in the dark, and trying to cut the net and set the orcas loose. But they were being guarded all day and all night by people on the boats with rifles.
It was terrible. It was just terrible. You felt like it was a prison camp. It was awful. And I think everybody that remembers it will tell you that.
Adolescents from 2 to 7 years old, the perfect age for capture and training, were quickly separated from their mothers and prepared for extraction. While desperately trying to reach her child through the twisted nets, one mother drowns. One last glimpse of her infant being dragged away, and she closes her blowhole and sinks lifelessly into the murky water. Her body was later discovered by reporters. John Crow was just 18 when he was hired to aid in the capture, and he remembers it very well.
Corrals are set up with net going down to the bottom on all sides. And then you have to figure a way to separate the animals, because you only want the little ones. Also, you leave a circular net out to keep some whales in it, because as long as there's one whale in captivity, the rest of them won't leave. It's kind of interesting.
4 youngsters also died in the assault. While charging the nets in final attempts to reach their mothers, they drowned. But their deaths were kept from the public eye. In a covert midnight mission, the bodies were weighted and hauled out to sea for secret disposal.
They had us slit them open and fill them with rocks and put anchors on their tail, and we sank them at that point.
Their bodies mysteriously washed up on shore on November 18, 1970, making national headlines and inciting public outrage. The outrage later inspired Washington state government to ban orca captures in Puget Sound for good. Surviving youths were lashed, hoisted onto boats, and dragged to shore, never to see their family again. A family unit as old as time was suddenly crippled forever.
My job, along with another guy, was to get her in a stretcher. And that was the bad part, because that was our last whale. So as soon as we left with her, where they started breaking down the rest of the outfit, and they released them then, but they didn't leave. They came right over the beach, and they just kind of milled about there. And they were communicating back and forth with the squeaks and shrieks that they do, and they call it spy hopping now, when the whale sticks his head up and looks around, and they were doing that. Actually, I kind of broke down and started crying. I kept working, but it was really too much for me to deal with at that point. And so we kept on anyway, and got the whale loaded, and they picked it up. The instant that whale cleared the water, where the sound, I suppose, didn't transmit through the water anymore, the whole rest of the pod of whales that were there just kind of like gave a big sigh and just swam off. That was the end of that.
During the commotion at Penn Cove, the call went out to aquariums around the world proclaiming there were whales for sale in Puget Sound. It was the largest whale capture in history. 7 youngsters were caught in all. 2 went to Japan, 1 each to Texas, Australia, the UK, and France, and 1 6-year-old female to Miami. Miami, Florida, the chic, glamour, and fashion capital of the Southeast. The town that boasts a multi-billion-dollar tourism industry adopted a brand new attraction on September 14, 1970. 3,000 miles from home, the young female was unloaded and moved into her new permanent residence at the Miami Seaquarium. She was purchased for a mere $6,000 to become the second captive killer whale on display on the East Coast. Given a brand new identity, she became known as
Lolita, the killer whale.
At this aquarium, Lolita was temporarily reunited with Hugo, who was captured from the very same family just 2 years earlier. But he died of mysterious causes in 1980, leaving her alone. Now, Lolita is the remaining survivor of the 58 whales taken over the years from Puget Sound. 3 decades later, she is still the star attraction of this aquarium, living and performing in a tank not much larger than a hotel swimming pool. Just south of this aquarium lives a man whose entire life has been centered on dolphins and whales. His name is Rick O'Barry. Rick spent much of his youth working for the Miami Seaquarium, capturing and training dolphins. He developed a close relationship with the dolphin stars of the popular 1960 series Flipper. Rick quickly became the highest paid animal trainer in the world and captured over 100 dolphins for the entertainment industry.
Well, I was 21 years old at the time, and I just started. My first day on the job was capturing dolphins in Biscayne Bay. In those days, Biscayne Bay was teeming with dolphins. They were everywhere. And in that first year, we captured over 100. And they continued capturing dolphins and depleted the bay to where it's practically empty now. You could buy them right off the Seaquarium boat for $300 a piece, or $350 if you wanted it sized and sexed. And of course, everybody wanted females. So the majority were females that we captured. And we would sort through them and take the young females, take them away from their lactating mothers many times. We sold a great many of them to the Navy, U.S. Navy. And then the Flipper TV series started, and I was promoted to Flipper's trainer, as it were. I actually captured those 7 dolphins. We ended up using 5. Kathy was the one I thought of as Flipper. We used her 99% of the time in the TV series, and when it ended, her life changed dramatically. She didn't have all this activity that she had in intermingling and so forth. Placed in a steel tank at the Seaquarium in isolation, and she died there of self-induced asphyxiation. She just didn't take the next breath. And that's how it is with dolphins and whales. They're not automatic air breathers. Every breath is a conscious effort, and they can end their life anytime they want to by not taking the next breath. The word suicide comes to mind, and that's the only word in the English language that describes that self-induced asphyxiation. I think this happens to orcas in captivity and other dolphins. I think it happens at strandings, but it's never recorded because the facility wants to put their best face forward, and so they would cover that up. But the necropsy would show something. But again, it's filled out by the vet who is loyal to the client, not the patient. When the Flipper series ended, I left for a while, and then I got a call from the manager, Burton Clark, asking me to come back, that they brought in a whale, the first killer whale in the eastern United States. His name was Hugo, and they built a special tank for him, which houses manatees today. I mean, this is like a teacup for a whale, if you can imagine. When I fed the whale, his tail would actually lie on the bottom, curled up, and his head would be completely out of the water. It was so small. And I was supposed to train him, but I refused to do that or do any show because it looked ridiculous. And I finally left in disgust.
Now Rick works for the World Society for the Protection of Animals. He focuses on dolphin releases rather than captures. And some of these releases, many of which were without permission, have thrust him directly into the media spotlight, and on numerous occasions, behind bars.
I was arrested 12 times, I remember, in 1 year. And always for the same thing, and it was always by my design, for civil disobedience. Today we know there's only three things killing dolphins: our pollution, our fishing nets, and our captivity. Captivity kills. I didn't know that when I was 21 years old at the Miami Sea Aquarium in 1961. The dolphinarium would have you believe that they came out of the sky or God put them there. But in fact, it's a very violent procedure. You have to capture them, separate them from their families, drag them literally kicking and screaming into these tanks, and their job for the rest of their life is to amuse an endless stream of people. There's a space between us and wildlife, and we haven't learned to respect that space. We are a spectator society, and that's part of the problem. We just can't leave it alone. Dolphins and whales are acoustical creatures, and their primary sense is sonar. When you capture an animal like Lolita and put her in this concrete box, you take away the two most important aspects of her life: her family and the world of sound. They use their sonar for capturing fish, chasing fish, for navigating, finding one another. In captivity, in isolation, in a concrete box, they don't use their sonar. There's no need for it. So this becomes a form of sensory deprivation. Dolphins and whales are controlled by food in captivity. The training is controlled by food, and the trainers call this positive reward. But from Lolita's perspective, it's food deprivation. In other words, if she doesn't do what she's supposed to do, the whistle is not blown and she doesn't get the fish. If she were transferred to a natural sea pen in Puget Sound, where she came from, she wouldn't have to do these stupid dolphin tricks all day long, these monotonous. It's even monotonous for the trainers. I can tell you that, having done that show over and over and over again.
One doesn't have to be an expert on whales to determine that Lolita is unhappy. A visit to her tank between performances or late into the night will reveal a valiant creature in distress, one who floats lifelessly in her tiny pool, alone.
It's all about money.
We have a fantastic park with great animals and great shows, and we really encourage everybody to come out here and see the park.
To date, Lolita has earned the Miami Seaquarium owners roughly $160 million in a $60 billion industry. As reward, she is housed in a deteriorating sideshow park, living in solitary confinement in the world's oldest and smallest tank. A tank that is illegal by government standards.
This is by far the worst facility in the world for orcas. It's substandard, it's illegal, and it's living proof that the system doesn't work. We had a Marine Mammal Protection Act passed in 1972 to offer protection to these animals. But the Marine Mammal Protection Act today might as well be called the Marine Mammal Park Protection Act, because that's who they protect. People are under the illusion that the National Marine Fisheries Service are there to protect the animals. The fact is, they are a regulatory agency. They issue permits, and they have approved 99.4% of all permits that cross their desk to exploit marine mammals any way you want to. That's the reality of it. They've approved permits to kill up to 7 million dolphins in the tuna fishing industry, another billion-dollar industry. Lolita's tank is clearly illegal, but nobody is doing anything about it. They're doing things to protect the corporation that are exploiting Lolita. She's not living, she's simply surviving. There's a difference. Living is doing things. Living is chasing fish. It's cooperatively feeding. It's moving around 100 miles throughout the day. That's what living is all about. She is simply surviving in this tank. Lolita and other dolphins and whales are self-aware creatures. They routinely make choices and decisions regarding the details of their life. They are entitled to freedom of choice. Thus, Lolita is entitled to freedom. Capturing her and dragging her kicking and screaming into that concrete box is simply wrong. What a violation of nature, and what hypocrisy to say we're capturing these dolphins and bringing them to the Miami Seaquarium or SeaWorld or some other park so that we can teach you respect for nature.
Come to the place where whales and dolphins fly, where creatures lurk, and where the forecast for fun is always scattered showers and 55 degrees. Miami Seaquarium, your window to the world of the sea.
What is that? It's so obvious that this show is nothing more than a spectacle of dominance. That's all it really is. And it teaches us that dominance is good, dominance is right, dominance works. And that's really the danger. That's the biggest problem. Because it's not just an animal rights issue, it's an issue about education and people. It's about the millions of people who come through there every year and learn that it's okay to abuse nature. As long as we call it education and research, you can literally get away with murder.
With respect to the question of education at marine parks, it's bogus. It's basically like having Walt Disney tell you how rodents' biology works. It's fantasy. It's not real.
Well, we know what the problem is now. What's the solution? How do we fix this? This is a billion-dollar industry, and it's based on supply and demand, just like any other product. If we can educate the consumers and they become responsible, perhaps they won't buy a ticket. And that's the solution. Don't buy a ticket. That's the best peaceful, nonviolent way to beat this industry.
So courageous and so gentle. Is it simply Lolita's fate to die in that miserable tank? Or will she one day swim free again with her family in the wild? Removed from universal nature, civilized man surveys the animal kingdom through the foggy glass of his limited knowledge and perceives a whole image distorted. Upon our pedestal, we patronize them for their tragic fate of having taken form so far below our own. We use them as a resource and exploit them for profit, and therein we err, and greatly err, for the animal is not measurable by man. They are not inferiors or underlings, they are other nations, caught with our own in a net of life. As intelligent, rational beings, we have a moral obligation to cherish and respect all life. Until we do, Lolita, like so many others, will remain a slave to to entertainment.